Morning. My name is Radzivilovskiy. Judge Jim Gray, on behalf of Washington Square News, thank you for taking your time to do this interview. I recently wrote an article for Washington Square News, urging my fellow students at NYU to look beyond the main two candidates and at what message a third-party vote can send. And I supported your ticket with Gary Johnson. However, instead of calling it a waste vote, as Mr. Johnson puts it, I call it a protest vote, to emphasize that it would directly challenge the current two-party monopolization on the political process. So with that, on to my first question. What will it take to get a third party any sort of leverage in a national election? There hasn't been much luck since Ross Perot in 1992. And it's apparent that no third-party candidate got into the major debates this election year. Would there need to be a fundamental change in certain institutional structures to make this happen?
Well, thank you, and you've certainly done your homework, Edward, and it's nice to be with you. I think I'm going to disagree with you and with Governor Johnson, if that's what he said. I don't think this is a protest vote. I certainly don't think, waste your vote on me. I don't know where that came from. I am here to tell you that a wasted vote is voting in favor of someone that you do not believe in. And Governor Gary Johnson really is the most qualified person to be president of the United States. Not only that I believe is on the ballot, but actually that I know of. So voting in favor of somebody that will help our country, that will stand up for what we hold dear, which is our freedoms, our liberties, and financial responsibility, that's just the way to go. In direct answer to your question, we really need to get enough votes in this election, which is the day after tomorrow, to qualify for federal matching funds. Yes, that would be really important for us libertarians. We're the third largest party in the country, but also to show the people that we are viable. Because if we just be seen as being viable, I believe that we will win the election. We would have won this year. I will go to the rest of my life believing, had we been able to be a part of the presidential debates, because that would have shown that we're viable. So it's just a question of getting to that next level. I believe it's 5% nationwide. We just get that, my goodness sakes, that's not a protest. That's called history. So we will be the beginning of the end of the two-party system, I believe, if we just get 5% of the vote day after tomorrow. And I guarantee, just like you, everybody that votes for Governor Gary Johnson and Jim Gray, within a year or two will still be proud of that vote. And I deeply believe that maybe 60% of the people that do not, within a year or two, will really wish they had.
What is your opinion on why voter apathy among students is so prevalent across the country? Many of my fellow students wanted me to ask you if their vote even matters in a state such as New York, which is solidly blue.
I think there is voter apathy among the younger people. I think there's also voter apathy among the older ones for various reasons. It's just a question of exposure. I spoke at Stanford University actually a week ago yesterday, and I spoke for about an hour and a half. After that, I had a radio interview, so I stood off to the corner and did my radio shot on my cell phone. Nobody left. They were all talking in groups of 5 or 6, excitedly. After I was done, 3 of them came up to me and said, Judge Gray, I've never been so excited about voting. It's just a question of exposure. And a lot of older people, get kind of jaded thinking, oh, it won't make any difference or whatever. It's simply wrong. I think I can tell you, Edward, that when I became eligible to vote a long time ago, you had to be 21. Now you have to be 18. But I have voted in every election since I became eligible. I was in the Peace Corps, I voted absentee. I was in the Navy, I voted absentee. I actually voted absentee this time because I was going to be on the road of campaigning. I'm asking you and people watching to make that same commitment that I will, by the time you're my age, you will have voted in every election. I then get a high five from people and tell them kind of jokingly that as long as they commit voluntarily to do that, if they don't do it, I'll come looking at them. But, it's just important, I believe, to vote. You give up your right to complain if you do not vote.
Right. But in the long term of things, is there some institutional structure that has to be changed, because now, maybe because of the electoral process, voting really, I mean, in statistical terms, doesn't really matter. And a lot of people say people vote to make themselves feel good, and they want to. I feel that we students, we really want to make a difference. And we just feel that sometimes there are certain barriers that need to be changed over time. And what barriers do you think they are, and how can we change them?
And that's a good observation, and I really think there have to be some fundamental changes. Unfortunately, we have to win within this system before we can actually change them. Three come to mind. One is that we really, I think, each state should change the electoral college rules such that instead of the winner takes all, so if one party, one candidate gets two more votes, one more vote than the other, they take all of the electoral college votes from that state. I think that in some places, like New York, like California, where I'm from, that are heavily going to vote in favor of Obama, it tends to discourage people, even, Republicans, Libertarians, and Democrats, because their vote won't count, because he's going to win one way or the other. If you were to make it proportional like they do in England, I think that would really help. And number two, I really like the idea of what they call instant runoff voting. That means that you get away from this wasted vote stuff, because you vote for the candidate that you really respect the most. And then if for some, say there are three candidates, and we'll call them Romney, Obama, and Johnson. So you vote for Johnson because he's really your favorite. Then you tally the votes and you count them up. And for example, if Romney and Obama end up being ahead, and then you eliminate the votes for Johnson, and then you poke a button on the computer because you will have voted a second time while you were in the ballot box. And if for some reason your first choice did not make the cut, then you will have voted for the second, and then you can vote for whichever other one you wish. And it's kind of an instant runoff. So that is enabling you to express your mind, but also to feel that you're voting for one of the two lesser of two evils, in effect. I mean, I don't like the idea of voting for lesser of two evils, but I think this would really be creeping democracy at its best. The third way, they call it, is weighted voting, where you can actually, 1 through 10, you can assess, say again, the three candidates here, and you vote for Johnson, and you see the wisdom of that, you give him a 10. Then you look at Romney and think, maybe a little bit, I'll give him a 4. And then you look at Obama and say, well, maybe a little bit, I'll give him a 4 or a 5 or a 3 or wherever it comes out. And that way, then you simply add up all of the votes in the election, and you will have expressed your opinion about all of them. So I think weighted voting is also a pretty good idea. But again, you're not going to see the Republicans and Democrats going for any of these. We need to win this system before we can change it. But I think your observations are valid.
Right. Thank you. And as a student, I think that one of the main reasons for voter apathy is student debt. One of the other third-party candidates, Jill Stein, has consistently called student debt as a form of indentured servitude. And especially at NYU, which has one of the highest tuition rates in the country, I think I kind of feel that too. And certainly this is a very provocative comparison to indentured servitude. Do you share her view?
No. I have a defect, Edward, as the candidate, and I tell the truth. So you ask me a question, I will tell you my honest answer. I think that you and I are in the privileged class to be able to go to college. Many people around our country have not been so blessed for one reason or another, and so they are paying their taxes. I don't feel that they should pay taxes for us to be able to go to college. I would get the federal government out of this completely, and that's the reason, by the way, why the tuition has gone up so much. You have a third-party payer, just like in healthcare. Then cost is not that much of a factor. What happens when you have a third-party payer? The prices go up. And that's true in healthcare, and that's certainly true with regard to your tuition. I'll bet you, Edward, that your tuition has gone up in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And it's caused mostly because you're not so competitive, because all you're trying to do is get through this, and you're willing to sign a loan that would actually have a larger amount of tuition because you don't have to pay it right away. Wouldn't you rather, because if you were actually competitive, let me ask you a question. Unfair advantage, I'll ask it anyway. Have you received an application for a credit card in the last 6 months, 12 months?
Yeah.
You know why? Because you're a good credit risk. You're probably not working now, but you are a good risk for these people. It's the same thing with your student loans. The government should not be involved in insuring these loans. So many student loans will never be paid back. the people shouldn't have them anyway. They're not really serious students. They're not a good risk, but the government guarantees them, so the loans will be made. All of this increases the price. So I would respond, and Ms. Stein, I love her with regard to our social issues. With regard to financial issues, I think she's just off in space. It just isn't practical, doesn't work. Wouldn't you rather, I'll ask you my second question, wouldn't you rather at the end of your college career have a $20,000 loan at 6% instead of an $80,000 loan at 3%? Because that's literally what the government has caused.
Yeah, I mean, of course I would prefer the latter. I think, though, some students would say that, at least currently, if sometimes they could receive some help from the government right now, so less in the long term thinking of things, that would help them.
Let me interrupt you again for a minute, because so many people really despise the idea of the government spending all this money, borrowing and spending, and our deficit is huge. Terrible thing, except for me. And so basically that's what you're saying. You know, students think, oh my goodness, our future is supremely at risk because our government is, for every dollar it's spending, it's borrowing 43 cents today. And we can talk about that. The biggest security threat to our country is a bad economy. Right. And that's where we're going because of government spending. So you're saying, oh, this is terrible to have crony capitalism, and the government is paying people for drilling for oil or paying people for not growing corn or whatever, except for me. You know, my student loans, that's okay because it's for me. So, you know, again, I tell the truth, but I wouldn't have the government spending on any of these things. The costs will come down. Fewer loans will be made because the risks will be borne by the people lending the money instead of the government, and everything will be so much better. And you will, for the rest of your life, benefit because you are a part of that privileged class. You got to go to not only a good college, but NYU, and good for you. But I think that it's your responsibility to foot that bill, which then again will be lower. That's just my position. And I think upon reflection, most people would agree with it.
Thank you. And regarding the drug war, from your experience as a judge, how have mandatory minimum sentences and the increased privatization of the prison system, what you often refer to as the prison industrial complex, how have they adversely affected drug enforcement as a criminal justice matter instead of a public health concern?
Well, those are two vastly different questions. I'll take the first one first. The issue of our policy of drug prohibition. You've done your homework, so you've heard me say that it is the biggest failed policy in the history of our country, second only to slavery. We lead the world in having people in prison in our country. We have something like 5% of the world's population and 25% of its prisoners. And here, I assure you, we're number one does not make me proud, nor should it make any of us proud. So I would go around the country and say that we have hundreds of thousands of people in prison today that simply should not be there. And it's caused by the fundamental corruption of money, because I've had so many people tell me, in Washington, Judge Gray, you must understand, most people realize the war on drugs is not winnable, but it's eminently fundable, and they're addicted to the drug war funding. So let's treat a health issue as a health issue and a criminal justice issue as a criminal justice issue, and it makes no sense to punish people for what they put into their bodies at all. Robert Downey Jr. He'll be a lifelong heroin addict, but he's doing real well now, but he'll always have that propensity. Putting him in jail for that addiction is kind of like putting an alcoholic in jail for that addiction. It's a health issue. Right. But if they drive a motor vehicle impaired by either alcohol, cocaine, whatever, that's a crime. So let's focus on those actions instead of what they put into their bodies. With regard to the privatization issue, it is absolutely fundamentally clear that we cannot have private prisons, any private individuals deciding who comes to prison, how long they stay there. The answer categorically is no. But as far as the privatization of the prisons themselves, as long as they don't have control on who comes in and who stays how long, is usually better than, and they have better rehabilitation, it's safer, it's less costly, the rest of that. And so I actually favor the privatization of prisons, except in the circumstances in which the government promises them that they'll be able to keep their occupancy high. Now that's fundamentally corrupting as well. But otherwise, I think privatized prisons are okay.
How successful do you think the Occupy movement, or even the Tea Party, has been in dealing with some of the issues you have raised? Do you support both movements? Do you not support one of those movements?
Look, I think they've been highly successful. They've gotten an awful lot of attention on appropriate subjects. And honestly, with Governor Gary Johnson and I, we appeal to the Occupy movements. We really do stand for responsibility at all levels of society. For example, I was a federal prosecutor in Los Angeles, ended up heading a unit prosecuting frauds against the government, prosecuted a lot of bank vice presidents for corruption. We believe in responsibility. The higher level of trust you have, the more scrutiny. So we really appeal to groups like that. The Tea Party movement, again, we don't believe in crony capitalism for paying money into the private sector, interfering into the private sector, playing favorites. Neither do they. We appeal across the board. Even Jill Stein and her Green Party, when I was running for U.S. Senate in California, I ran as a Libertarian, they didn't have a candidate. They endorsed me because, the issue of drug prohibition and putting our military in all these wars and everything. So we really do appeal. We're in the political mainstream, Edward. We are both financially responsible and socially tolerant. And so we just get that word out. We will be that unifying force. And besides, one more thing. We have an ace in the hole, a real trump card, because not only does Governor Johnson have a great record, and he's done this in New Mexico, which is very unusual for anybody in this race, but we will put in a coalition government. That means that, yes, when we win, probably in 2016, that we will not only have libertarians and independents in our administration, but also Republicans, Democrats, Greens, whomever, as long as they agree with our approach of financial responsibility and social tolerance. And then when we have all of this bipolar politics going on, this selfish politics, we'll actually be able to have some of them go out, talk to their colleagues, you're Republicans, you're Democrats, talk to your Confederates, tell them to get on board. This is a good idea. We'll give credit to anybody that has a good idea, anybody that embraces a good idea. So we'll work together for America instead of all this selfish politics going on today. So I think, these movements have been great. They're a little bit rudderless, a little bit kind of now what do we do sort of thing. But I think that they have latched upon some really important issues, and we have the answers for them. So it's a good question, and I think they're with us.
Thank you. And just two more questions.
Take your time. This is fun.
Thank you. The Libertarian Party platform, as you said, is for very limited government interference, including on issues such as healthcare. So just want to give a quick hypothetical on a healthcare question. And this hypothetical was given to Ron Paul in one of the debates. So say you have a person who is in a coma, and that person is going to die. That person never took out insurance. What should happen? And some people, on the left would say that we can have a risk of corporate tyranny.
Well, first of all, it's a very difficult hypothetical, and it's very sobering. But let me put it this way. I was in the Peace Corps. I care about people. And if you were bleeding on the street, Edward, I hope it never happens, but we have no legal obligation to help you. We just don't. However, may I say quickly, we will because we want to, because that's who we are. So we will set up a safety net for our people. But the difference is, instead of government being the first resort, which is the case with regard to Obamacare, and by the way, Romney was the architect of Obamacare, so he's not going to orphan his own child. So they have government as the first resort. We say no. The first resort is for those people that can take care of themselves, let them. Get the government out of this completely. We're having the Department of Motor Vehicles, in effect, run our healthcare system. So get them out of it. Costs will come down. Competition will come back. People will be rewarded for their services. We'll bring back that best healthcare system in the world that we used to have when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s until the government started getting involved. But now to get to your question precisely, there are people in the world, in our country, that cannot take care of themselves. Right. I think maybe they're fewer than we think, but they are there. I was on the mental health calendar as a judge. I've seen these things. What are we going to do about them? And the answer is, from a practical standpoint, we're going to have government health clinics, probably on contract with people. We'll pay money for medicines, for doctors, for nurses, for clinics, instead of bureaucracy, administration, and fraud. And then people that come in there If they'll have maybe a $10 copay just to keep them from coming there because they're lonely. They really can't afford that either, then that'll be waived. But otherwise, this person you're talking about who seems to just come from nowhere, be in a coma, or just, has a bad case of the flu, we will provide medical care for our people, not again because we have to, but because that's who we are. We want to. You can call it socialized medicine if you want to. I lived in a socialized medicine situation in that great socialistic enterprise called the United States Navy, and it works. My son was born at the Naval Hospital in Guam. Yes, it can be expensive, but far, far less expensive, far less intrusive than all of this government administration, bureaucracy, and fraud we're talking about today. So that's what I would do. And honestly, I think probably Ron Paul, had he gotten into this, would pretty much agree. And I think Governor Johnson would too.
Right. And on November 7th, what is the next step for you?
You have a real future as a reporter, Edward.
Thank you.
To get right in there. Good for you. If we will on November 6th, which is day after tomorrow, have our victory celebration, our election celebration in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The day after, on the 7th, we're going to meet 9 o'clock in the morning with the people from the campaign and decide what we now do. We'll keep up this momentum. I will argue that we really should go forward, simply continue to get our word out to people because we really do have answers. And I fully propose we're going to convince Governor Gary Johnson to run again for president in 2016 because this is what the country really needs. And I believe that everybody that votes for us, like I said, will be comfortable with that and proud of that vote. And 60% of the people that did not will be scratching their heads saying, wait a minute, I just didn't know that Governor Johnson was viable. We do have these answers. And in the meantime, I'll probably write a weekly column about, the Libertarian way. We'll talk about immigration. We'll talk about Social Security, Medicare, health care, all these wars that we're in, our budget deficits, and all of these things. Jobs. There really are answers. There really are. In fact, you can continue to talk to me all morning and we can discuss how we really can retrieve this prosperity, this equal opportunity and freedom that today is literally falling through our grasp. Just to give one example, today we have drones flying all over our cities, surveilling us. That's what the Obama administration is doing. That's not liberal values. No one that has liberal values would be doing such a thing. He signed the National Defense Authorization Act, a direct frontal attack on our civil liberties. We say we'll repeal them. Romney and Obama are so interchangeable, so connected on these things. We call them Robomney. There's no difference. So we will call attention to these people. Our country is in jeopardy, not only for financial, budgetary reasons, which is direct frontal assault again on our existence as a society, but also for our values, for our rights, for our liberties. So this is what we're going to continue to talk about. I'm vastly disappointed that we were not a part of these presidential debates. We're going to pursue that as well. But the Presidential Debates Commission is completely controlled and locked up by who? By Republicans and Democrats, and they are absolutely livid about keeping out any third voice. We're going to pursue that as well. So there's hope for the future as long as we can continue to keep some viability between now and 2016. Good luck to us all.
Thank you very much, Judge Jim Gray. That was very inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your interest, and go get them. We'll do it again as time goes along.
All right. Thank you.
Good luck, and I hope you're doing okay in New York from Sandy. I know that was severe. I hope you've got, I guess you obviously have electricity.
Yeah,
but,
we just got it back.
Yeah, our heart goes out to our people there in New Jersey, New York, etc. Thanks again. Good luck to us all.
Right,
we'll talk
and good luck to you on Election Day.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.